A 2,500-year-old prophecy predicted Jesus' death to the exact day. But here's the shocking part. Most Christians today think that it hasn't happened yet. Daniel's 70-week prophecy is the most precise prediction in all of human history. An angel named Gabriel gave the exact timeline centuries before Jesus was even born. Most respected scholars agree that 69 weeks of this prophecy were perfectly fulfilled. They can show you the math. They can prove it down to the exact day. But then something strange happens. They say that the final week has not happened yet. They create a gap, a 2,000-year-old gap between week 69 and week 70. And they're still waiting for that final week to be fulfilled in some future 7-year tribulation period. But here's what is really strange. Gabriel gave Daniel 6 specific requirements that had to be fulfilled during these 70 weeks. 6 impossible things that sound like the most important events in all of human history. Let me read you the exact words that have puzzled Bible scholars for over 2,000 years. This is the complete Daniel 70 weeks prophecy from Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. Verse 24 starts, 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublesome times. Verse 26, and after the 62 weeks, Messiah will be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. And till the end of the war, desolations are determined. Verse 27, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. So Christians look at these 6 requirements and they say, well, obviously none of these things have happened yet. That's why we need this gap. But what if they're wrong? What if those 6 impossible requirements were fulfilled exactly when Gabriel said they would be fulfilled, but in a way that's so unexpected that people are still missing it? See, Jesus himself said in Matthew 24, verse 44, therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. What if there never needed to be a gap at all, because everything happened in an hour we least expected? In the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to show you mathematical proof that will blow your mind. You'll discover why the most important events in human history happened exactly when the prophecy said they would, not in some distant future, but 2,000 years ago in a week that was so unexpected that most people are still waiting for it to happen. By the end of this video, you will never read Bible prophecy the same way again. Now, let me show you the part of Daniel's prophecy that no one argues about. This is where the mathematical precision will absolutely blow your mind. See, Gabriel told Daniel there would be 69 weeks from the decree to rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince. 69 weeks until the Messiah shows up as the Prince. Now, many Bible scholars have already done the math on this, and the results are stunning. From the decree that Artaxerxes gave to rebuild Jerusalem in 445 BC until Palm Sunday in 32 AD, turns out to be exactly 483 years. How many years is 69 weeks of years? 69 times 7 equals 483 years exactly. Think about that precision for just a second. Gabriel gave this prophecy to Daniel around 550 BC. He told Daniel that from a future decree to rebuild Jerusalem, it would be exactly 69 weeks of years until the Messiah shows up as the prince. And it happened exactly as Gabriel said it would, to the day. The mathematical precision is absolutely perfect. Now here's how we know that Palm Sunday was the end of the 69th week. Look at what happened that day and how Jesus responded. For 3 years, Jesus had been telling people not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Every time someone figured it out, he told them to keep quiet. He said, "Don't tell anyone yet." But on Palm Sunday, everything changed. When the religious leaders told Jesus to make his disciples stop calling him king, Jesus said, "I tell you, if these should keep silent, the stones would immediately cry out." Jesus was telling them that this praise could not be stopped. This had to happen. This was a prophetic moment that was planned before the foundation of the world. Jesus knew that this was the exact day that Gabriel had prophesied about. When Jesus got close to Jerusalem that day, he started weeping over the city and said, "If you had known, even you, especially in this, your day, the things that make for your peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes." Jesus called it this your day. He knew this was the prophetic day that had been marked on God's calendar for over 400 years. Now here's what we know for certain. The first 69 weeks were fulfilled with mathematical precision. Gabriel said it would be exactly 69 weeks from the decree until Messiah the Prince. And it was exactly 69 weeks to the day. This proves that when God gives a timeline, he means exactly what he says. God doesn't round up or round down. God doesn't leave gaps. When God says 69 weeks, he means exactly 69 weeks. But here's where Christians create the problem. They say the 70th week is still coming in the future. They believe there will be a future 7-year tribulation period when the Antichrist rises to power, makes a peace treaty with Israel, then breaks it in the middle and demands to be worshiped as God. They say that at the end of those 7 years, Jesus will return and finally fulfill those 6 impossible requirements. But here's the real problem with this view. It misses the most important week in all of human history. Think about this. The most important events that ever happened were when Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead. That changed everything. That was when the old covenant ended and the new covenant began. That was when the temple system was replaced. That was when sacrifice for sin was finished forever. But according to the gap theory, all of these world-changing events happened outside the 70 weeks prophecy. The prophecy that was specifically given to us when the Messiah would come and what he would accomplish somehow does not include the Messiah's most important work? That would be like writing a biography of Abraham Lincoln but leaving out the Civil War and his assassination. That would be like telling the story of the Titanic but skipping the part where it hits the iceberg. Does that make any sense to you? So here's the question that changes everything. If the first 69 weeks were fulfilled with such mathematical precision, what happened to the 70th week? Did God suddenly become less precise? Or was the 70th week also fulfilled with the same mathematical precision as the first 69 weeks, but in a way so unexpected that people missed it? Now I'm going to show you a clue that Jesus himself gave us about the final week of Daniel's prophecy, a clue that most Christians completely miss. And when you see this clue, everything will click into place. This clue is found in Matthew chapter 24. Jesus is talking to his disciples about the end times, and he says something that should make every Bible student stop and think. Let me read this to you. Matthew 24 verses 15 through 22. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, let him who reads understand. In other words, this is a mystery, so we got to think about it. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, for then there will be such great tribulation, such has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor shall ever be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Did you catch what Jesus said? Unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Jesus is talking about days being shortened, and he mentions this right after talking about the abomination of desolation that Daniel prophesied about in Daniel chapter 9, exactly what we're talking about. Jesus is connecting his words to Daniel's prophecy. He specifically mentions the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So Jesus is talking about the exact same events that Daniel was writing about. And Jesus says these days will be shortened for mercy's sake. Unless they were shortened, no one would survive. Now here's the revelation that changes everything. What if Jesus was giving us a clue about Daniel's 70th week? What if the final week was supposed to be 7 years, but God shortened it to 7 days for mercy's sake? This would be the most unexpected twist in all of Bible prophecy. Everyone expects 7 years in the future, but it was actually 7 days in the past. What if the final week was not 7 years in the future? What if the final week was 7 days that already happened? 7 days from Palm Sunday to Resurrection Sunday. I know this sounds impossible. Everyone has already been taught that the final week has to be 7 years, but I'm about to show you mathematical proof that will blow your mind. Here's how the timeline works. Palm Sunday was the end of the 69th week. Everyone mostly already agrees on that. That is when Jesus was presented to Israel as Messiah the Prince. We already proved that with mathematical precision. But the 70th week started the very next day. Monday was day 1 of the final week. Tuesday was day 2. Wednesday was day 3. Thursday was day 4. Friday was day 5. Saturday was day 6. And Sunday was day 7. 7 days exactly from Monday after Palm Sunday to Resurrection Sunday. And right in the middle of those 7 days, on Wednesday, everything changed forever. Remember what Gabriel said about the final week? He said, in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. In the middle of the week. If the week is 7 days, we all know the middle of the week is Wednesday. That's the exact middle of the week. And what happened on Wednesday? Jesus was crucified. And when Jesus died, the sacrifice and offering system ended forever. The temple veil was torn in two from top to bottom. The separation between God and man was completely removed. No more animal sacrifices were needed. No more priests were needed. No more temple system was needed. Jesus became the final sacrifice in the middle of the week. He brought an end to sacrifice and offering forever. Now I know what most of you are thinking. Jesus was crucified on a Friday, but let me show you why it had to be Wednesday. Jesus said in Matthew 12, verse 40, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." 3 days and 3 nights. If Jesus was crucified on Friday and rose on Sunday morning, how many nights is that? Friday night and Saturday night. That's only 2 nights, not 3. But if Jesus was crucified on Wednesday, then you have Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. That is 3 nights exactly, and you have Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. That's 3 days exactly. A Wednesday crucifixion gives you exactly 3 days and 3 nights until Sunday morning resurrection. But here's even more proof. The Gospels tell us that after Jesus died, the women bought spices and prepared them to anoint his body. But if Jesus was crucified on a Friday, well, when would they have time to buy and prepare these spices? Because Friday evening would go straight into the Sabbath. No work could be done on the Sabbath. But John tells us that this Sabbath was a high day, a feast day Sabbath. See, there's more than just one Sabbath. We're not talking about the regular weekly Sabbath. This was the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is called a high Sabbath. So here's the timeline that makes sense. Jesus was crucified on Wednesday because Thursday was the high Sabbath, the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And Friday was a regular work day when the women could buy and prepare their spices. Then they would go into Saturday, which was the regular weekly Sabbath, and Sunday was when they went to the tomb and found it empty. A Wednesday crucifixion is the only timeline that fits all of the facts. And here's the most beautiful part. The mathematical precision is still perfect. God did not break his timeline. He compressed it. Instead of 7 years for the final week, God compressed the timeline to 7 days. Instead of the tribulation lasting for years, God compressed it to the most intense suffering that has ever happened, but accomplished in just a few hours on a Wednesday afternoon. See, Jesus took all that tribulation on himself. He experienced all the wrath and judgment that was supposed to last for years. He compressed it into the darkest hours on the cross. And this is exactly what Jesus meant when he said, unless those days are shortened, no flesh would be saved. If the tribulation had lasted for 7 years, no one could have survived it. The intensity would have been so much, but by shortening the days from 7 years to 7 days, and by taking all the suffering on himself, Jesus made it possible for everyone to be saved. God showed mercy by compressing the timeline. Instead of making the whole world suffer for 7 years, God let his own son suffer for 7 days and accomplish everything that needed to be accomplished. Now, I need to show you a confusion that has been tripping up Bible students for centuries. When you read Daniel chapter 9, you see 2 different phrases that seem to be talking about 2 different princes. In verse 25, Gabriel says, until Messiah the Prince. But then in verse 26, Gabriel says, the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now, most people think Gabriel is talking about 2 different princes. They think Messiah the Prince is obviously Jesus, but then they think that the prince who is to come is the Antichrist. But Gabriel is not talking about 2 different princes. He's talking about the same prince the whole time. Think about this logically. Gabriel already identified the prince in verse 25. He called him Messiah the Prince. So when Gabriel talks about the prince again in verse 26, why would he suddenly be talking about a different prince? And if he was, why wouldn't he clarify that just a little bit further? Gabriel doesn't need to say Messiah the Prince again. He already told us who the prince is. From this point on, when Gabriel says the prince, he's still talking about the same prince, the Messiah. But if the prince is the Messiah, then who are the people of the prince? The answer is simple. The Messiah's people are God's people, the Jews, the chosen people of Israel. And what did the Jews do to their Messiah? They rejected him. They crucified him. They destroyed their own prince. So think about what actually happened during the week that Jesus was crucified. The very people who had been shouting, Hosanna, blessed is the King on Sunday, were shouting, crucify him just a few days later. The religious leaders who were supposed to recognize their Messiah were the ones who arrested him. The crowds who were God's chosen people chose Barabbas and crucified Jesus. Pilate wanted to let Jesus go, but the people of the prince, God's own people, demanded that their prince be destroyed. Gabriel is not talking about some future Antichrist army destroying Jerusalem. Gabriel's talking about God's own people destroying their Messiah. But how does crucifying Jesus destroy the city and the sanctuary? Jesus himself tells us the answer. In John chapter 2, when the religious leaders asked Jesus for a sign, what did he say? He said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." They thought he was talking about the stone temple. They were standing right there in Jerusalem. But John tells us he was speaking of the temple of his body. Jesus was not talking about a building made of stones. Jesus was talking about himself. Jesus is the temple. Jesus is the holy place. Jesus is the sanctuary. Jesus is the most holy. But it wasn't just the sanctuary that was destroyed. Gabriel told Daniel the city would be destroyed too. And here's the part most people miss. When God speaks of the city, he's not talking about architecture. He's talking about the people. Just listen to how Jesus speaks in Matthew 23. He says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who sent her." He's not weeping over the buildings. He's weeping over the people, God's covenant people who have rejected him. Jerusalem was never just a location. It was a people, a covenant identity. And when Jesus died, Paul tells us, if one died for all, then all died. That's 2 Corinthians 5:14. That means that the old covenant people, the old Jerusalem, died too. If one died for all, and Jesus died for his people in Jerusalem, well then Jerusalem died. That was the destruction of the city, not a burning wall, a spiritual death. But resurrection followed. Revelations 21 shows us a new Jerusalem made of gold and jewels, shining with perfection. That's not geography. That's God's reborn people. The city was destroyed because the people died. If one died for all, well then all died. And they were all raised again, not under the law, but under grace, not as sinners, but as the new Jerusalem. So what about the abomination of desolation? What was the abomination that was placed in the holy place? Here's the answer that will blow your mind. The abomination was the sin of the entire world placed on Jesus. Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians, "For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him." God made Jesus, who never sinned, to become sin. All the sin of the entire world was placed on Jesus. Every murder, every lie, every act of hatred, every rebellion against God, all of it was placed on the one who had never sinned. I mean, think about what that means. Jesus is perfectly pure. Jesus is perfectly holy. But on the cross, all the filth of human sin was placed on him. All the abomination of human rebellion was placed on the most holy one. That is the abomination of desolation. Pure holiness contaminated with every sin that has ever been committed. And what does desolation mean? Desolation means to be left alone, to be abandoned, to be separated from God. When all the sin of the world was placed on Jesus, what happened? For the first time in all of eternity, Jesus was separated from his Father. Listen to what Jesus cried out from the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus experienced desolation. The holy place became desolate because sin separated the Son from the Father. When God's people crucified their Messiah, they destroyed the true temple. They destroyed the true sanctuary. They destroyed the true holy place. And when the true temple was destroyed, the old temple system became obsolete. The stone temple in Jerusalem was no longer needed. The animal sacrifices were no longer needed. The priesthood was no longer needed. That's why the temple veil was torn in two from top to bottom when Jesus died. God was showing that the separation between himself and humanity was removed. The old system was finished. The people of the prince destroyed the old covenant system by crucifying the one who would establish the new covenant system. Gabriel showed Daniel exactly what would happen. During the 70th week, in the middle of the week, the Most Holy would have an abomination placed on him that would make him desolate. This would bring an end to the sacrifice and offering forever. And that's exactly what happened. Now comes the moment of truth. Remember those 6 impossible requirements that forced Christians to put a gap in the Bible prophecy? Well, I'm going to show you how every single one of them was fulfilled with perfect precision during the 7 days from Palm Sunday to Resurrection Sunday. The first 4 requirements all dealt with humanity's sin problem. Finish the transgression, make an end of sin, make reconciliation for iniquity, bring in everlasting righteousness. Here's the key that unlocks everything. When Jesus died on the cross, the law died with him. Paul tells us in Romans, "For sin shall not have dominion over you, for you are not under the law, but under grace." We are not under law anymore. The law ended at the cross. Paul says God wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was against us, having nailed it to the cross. Now here's what that means. 1 John tells us sin is the transgression of the law. And Romans says, where there is no law, there is no transgression. Do you see what this means? Sin is breaking the law. But if the law ended at the cross, well, then sin ended too. Not because people stopped doing wrong things, but because there is no written law to break anymore. God took away that thing that was against us. And if there is no law to rebel against, then rebellion is finished. Transgression is completed. Not because people stopped rebelling, but because the thing they were rebelling against no longer exists. The reconciliation happened at the same time. Paul tells us God was in Christ, reconciling the world to himself. It was his decision to not impute their trespasses to them. God was reconciling the world to himself, not just some people, not just the people who believe the right things, the world, everyone, all of humanity. And this is where everlasting righteousness comes from. Paul says, "But now the righteousness of God apart from the law has been revealed." This is righteousness apart from the law. You do not have to earn it. You do not have to maintain it. You do not have to worry about losing it. It is everlasting because it comes from what Jesus did, not from what you do. All 4 requirements were fulfilled at the cross. The sin problem was solved forever. The 5th requirement was to seal up vision and prophecy. This means all prophetic fulfillment gets completed. Jesus himself told us this was fulfilled. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus says, "Until heaven and earth pass away, not one jot or one tittle will by any means pass from the law until all is fulfilled." But we know the law changed after Jesus died. We can now eat pork. Remember, the dietary laws no longer apply. Peter's vision in Acts chapter 10 proves this. So if the law changed, then according to Jesus, all must be fulfilled, and heaven and earth must have passed away. Not literally, but the old covenant heaven and earth passed away, and the new covenant heaven and earth began. All prophecy was sealed up and completed at the cross and resurrection. The 6th requirement was to anoint the most holy. This is about Jesus being consecrated for his ultimate work. When did this happen? Jesus tells us in John chapter 12, right before he talks about his upcoming death. He says, "The hour has come that the Son of Man should be glorified." Jesus was glorified at the cross. That is when he was anointed to become the most holy priest. That's what makes him the Messiah to begin with. That is when he was consecrated for his final work. not at his baptism, not when Mary poured oil on him, at the cross when he became the final sacrifice for all sin. Now here's something that should absolutely blow your mind. Do you know why the Jews rejected Jesus as their Messiah? It's because he did not come the way they expected. They were looking for a political king who would overthrow the Romans and establish an earthly kingdom. But Jesus came as a suffering servant. He came to die on a cross. He came to establish a spiritual kingdom, not a political one. See, the Jews missed their Messiah because he came in the hour they least expected and in the way they least expected. And here's the irony that should shock every Christian. Christians today are doing the exact same thing those Pharisees did. They're missing the fulfillment because it didn't look the way they expected. The Pharisees expected a physical king to bring a political kingdom. But Jesus said something radically different in Luke chapter 17, verse 20 and 21. He said, "The kingdom does not come with observation, nor will they say, 'See here,' or 'See there,' for indeed the kingdom of God is within you." The kingdom is not physical. It is not observable. It is spiritual and internal. Yet so many are still watching the news, waiting for political signs and physical temples, completely missing the reality that the kingdom already came, and it came within. They are missing the fulfillment of Bible prophecy because it happened in the hour they least expected and in the way they least expected. The Pharisees expected a conquering king and missed the suffering servant. Christians expect future physical events and miss the past spiritual fulfillment. Christians are looking for a future physical fulfillment. They are looking for rebuilt temples and political antichrists and a 7-year tribulation period. But the fulfillment already happened in a spiritual way that was so unexpected that they're still waiting for it to happen. Both groups are looking for the wrong thing in the wrong way at the wrong time. Both groups are missing God's work because it doesn't match their expectations. This is the danger of expecting God to work the way we think He should work, instead of recognizing how He actually works, which is in mystery. And this brings us to the most beautiful part of this whole story, the new covenant that Jesus established during that final week. Jeremiah prophesied about it. He said, "Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. They shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them. For I will forgive their iniquity, and their sin I will remember no more." Look at what this covenant promises. They shall all know me, from the least of them, the very worst of them, to the very greatest of them. Everyone will know God, not just some people, everyone. How is this possible? Because God's Spirit now lives inside all people. When Jesus died and rose again, He sent His Spirit to dwell in every human being. That is why people from every culture and every religion have some sense of the divine. That is why even atheists talk about love and justice and meaning. God's Spirit is in them, whether they recognize it or not. The new covenant includes everyone, from the least, the worst, to the greatest. From the most religious to the most rebellious. From the believer down to the atheist. God's Spirit lives in all of them. On the night before Jesus was crucified, what did Jesus say when He passed the cup to His disciples? He said, "This cup is the new covenant, in my blood, which is shed for you." Jesus confirmed the new covenant during the final week of the 70 weeks of Daniel. Not a peace treaty with Israel, not some future political agreement, the new covenant that changes everything forever. So what does this mean for your life today? It means you can stop waiting. You can stop living in fear of a future tribulation. You can stop worrying about end-time events that already happened 2,000 years ago. There is no 7-year tribulation coming. There is no Antichrist rising to power. There is no rebuilt temple needed. There is no rapture to escape a horrible future. All of those expectations were based on looking for physical, external fulfillment when God works in spiritual, unexpected ways. All of that was based on the gap theory, and the gap theory was based on not being able to see that the 6 requirements were already fulfilled. But now you know the truth. The work is finished. The prophecy is complete. The timeline is perfect. Think about the incredible precision of what God accomplished. Gabriel gave Daniel a prophecy that was mathematically perfect to the day. 483 years from the decree until Messiah the Prince, and 7 more days to accomplish the 6 most important requirements in human history. This was not plan B. This was not God scrambling to fix something that went wrong. This was planned before the foundation of the world with mathematical precision that takes your breath away. Your salvation was calculated before Daniel was even born. Your inclusion in God's family was determined before time began. Your righteousness was established before you took your first breath. You are not waiting for God to do something for you. God has already done everything for you. You're not hoping that you'll be accepted someday. You are already accepted right now, just as you are. The 6 requirements that seemed impossible have already been fulfilled on your behalf. Rebellion is finished. Sin is ended. You are reconciled. You have everlasting righteousness. All prophecy is complete. The Most Holy has been anointed. And this changes how you see every person you meet. The atheist who asks hard questions, the 6 requirements have been fulfilled for them too. That person who rejects Christianity, they are already included in the new covenant, whether they realize it or not. You do not have to save anyone. You do not have to fix anyone. You do not have to convert anyone. You just get to love them and let them know how treasured they already are. The work was completed exactly on schedule 2,000 years ago. It happened exactly when God said it would happen, but in ways so unexpected that people are still waiting for it to happen. But you don't have to wait anymore. The work is finished. The prophecy is complete, and love has already won. Thank you.